Good morning, or whatever time you're listening to it. Welcome back to the Inside Out Nutrition Podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Knoll. Today we could do something kind of fun. We're going to do Q&A. So if you follow me on Instagram, you will have already seen the story asking for questions that you would like answered on the podcast. So this is what we're doing today. If you did not see that story, or if you want to get questions answered, we'll be doing this again at some point. So definitely DM me, or you can reach out on my website on the contact me, and those will absolutely be included in the next one we do. So, also side note, it's going to be really exciting. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to start having guests on the podcast. So if you're looking for more of a conversational, educational platform, as well as just a fun conversation, that will be upcoming, and I'm very excited for that. Our first one will be next week. And if you follow me on YouTube and are watching these on YouTube, I apologize for the delay in the sound matching the actual video. So that should be improved this week. And I apologize for those kind of painful to watch episodes. All right, so let's answer some questions. Our first one is going to be, are there negatives of frozen vegetables compared to buying fresh as far as health? So actually, it's quite the opposite. There's nothing wrong with buying a frozen, and in some cases, you actually do better buying frozen because they're flash frozen. Obviously, if we're looking at like pesticides and GMOs, those will be a little bit different because that's going to be the same as if you buy a organic fresh vegetable versus an organic frozen, same thing. But we're talking about the same comparison of an organic or non-organic fresh versus frozen. So if you do flash frozen, you're actually able to hold more of the nutrients in longer versus, for example, if you have vegetables sitting out on your counter for a couple of days, the heat will actually start to degrade the micronutrients in there. So you'll have a little bit less. The negative is when you cook them down, you typically do lose some of that. However, if you're consuming the juices that's coming as like a byproduct, then you should be good there. However, the longer you do have fresh sitting out, if it's in your fridge, you typically are going to get away with it. But again, a fridge is going to be a higher temperature than a flash frozen, so you still will have some loss. But nothing to stress yourself out, nothing to feel like you need to buy your vegetables every 2 days. We're talking about pretty minimal changes in a nutrient amounts. The only one that is interesting to just note here that carrots and tomatoes are actually the opposite, that as we cook, we have enhanced micronutrients. It makes it easier for us to absorb those. So those are two vegetables that do really well cooking and improved. So you can buy those fresh or you can buy those frozen. Same thing, as you cook that, you'll get a little bit higher benefits. All right, our second question is actually going to be, why do you get bloated when eating a salad if it's low in calories and supposed to be healthy? So this comes in a couple of parts. I guess we'll cover what type of salad we're eating, because there is plenty that you can order. So if you're looking like your standard, like a wedge salad, that should really cause no bloating. And if you are dealing with bloating, that could be from a dairy intolerance or a fat issue with breakdown. So that would be a separate thing. I'm assuming we're talking about like high fibrous vegetables. So our like harvest salads, maybe we even have some quinoa in there and some whole grains. Maybe we're just talking sweet potato, a bunch of romaine lettuce, spring mix, some broccoli, whatever have you. If you're having an issue with having bloating after eating your vegetables, large salads, those type of things, then we're talking about fiber content. Most of that fiber in those meals are going to be from an insoluble source, which means the body just doesn't break it down. It doesn't absorb. It goes straight through. It adds the bulk to our stool. So it's a positive, and we need that in our diet. But a negative is, in a lot of cases for people, it does build up gas. If it's an uncomfortable, painful gas and bloating, then we do need to look at absorption rate. So one way that you can test it, just make it a little bit easier on the system, would be massage your vegetables, really help to break down the fiber before you consume it. You can also just lightly roast the vegetables that you'll be adding to it. So as it is getting closer to fall, it might be more of a appealing idea. You can also look at digestive enzymes specified for carbohydrate digestion and fiber digestion if you're having gas specifically that smells with a lot of discomfort. Otherwise, just feeling bloated. It could also just be from the sheer volume. The stomach rugae stretches. You get expansion. It's normal. It's a part of our stomachs can only respond. It has a certain size and it stretches, and you're going to see an external response to that. But that should be gone within 2 to 3 hours from consuming it, if not even 1.5 if you got faster digestion and breakdown. An easy way to help manage that would be having the salad as kind of your main part to it, but then also make sure you do have some protein with that will incur those digestive enzymes and a good fat source, so it's not just straight up vegetables. However, the volume factor will still be a part of it. I guess as a side note, just on the salads, as long as we're on this question, salads, when we put the like quotations of it being healthy, in some cases when eating out, I actually avoid salads because salads are going to be one of the, if we're talking unhealthy as far as a caloric load, are going to be one of the lower qualities, health food items on that list, just because they're so calorically dense, because most people don't want to eat a salad that tastes really dry. So we add a ton of fats that we may not even realize are in there, which typically means there's a lot of sodium that's higher. Our dressings typically have a lot of added sugars that we're not aware of, balsamic glazes that are added sugars that wouldn't normally if you made it at home. And then you'll also have the quality of the vegetables may or may not be fantastic. So depending on where you're eating out, your typical fast food joint salads, I would kind of steer clear from. All right, third question is there such a thing as too little fat while trying to manage cholesterol and lose weight? I guess this is a two-part question. As far as losing weight, you don't have to be low fat to lose weight. You need to moderate your fat. Fat is the highest caloric load of the 3 macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fat, with 9 calories per 1 gram. However, it's basically total calories throughout the day and how we're breaking down our macros. If our ratio of fat from so say our calories are fine, our protein are fine, but we're having like really high carbs and really, really low fat, we can see some negatives because we might be getting plenty of micronutrients from the carbohydrates in our diet, but we're not actually able to absorb those because we have no fat for the fat-soluble vitamins to actually be adequately absorbed and then used by the body. You'll also see negatives as joints, soreness. You'll have increased inflammation. You could have brain fog. Our brain is not getting enough fat to function properly. So rather than doing a low fat because you have high cholesterol, I would manage the sources of fat. So we're looking at doing more of a plant-based fat source. So it doesn't mean you can't ever have an animal saturated fat. But if you know you are someone who likes a red meat or a higher fat like the dark meat of a chicken, I would have a plant-based source of fat rather than cheese or a cream sauce on top, something that's going to continue to add higher saturated fat content. And do that instead. You can also, which I would even just do this no matter what, if you have high cholesterol, would be increase soluble fiber. So the stuff that will help basically, it dissolves in water. It does the same. It pulls cholesterol, helps keep your arteries clear, brings down total cholesterol, and then you can also increase your omega-3s. That will help convert our HDL. We want that higher from our LDL, which is our bad cholesterol. So those are good ways just to manage it in general, even if you're not trying to lose weight. Our fourth question, I guess following along with the fat, is what is MCT oil and the benefits of it? MCT oil is just a medium chain triglyceride. It's easier to break down and be utilized from the body. It typically produces ketones, which then can be used for energy, which if we don't have available glucose, ketones are our fat storage energy source. They're harder to produce typically, but in MCT oil, you'll see a lot of your bulletproof coffees having MCT oil, or you'll have MCT oil with your coffee in these weight loss. It's a easier fat to digest if you don't handle fat as well, so it doesn't make you feel uncomfortable or require quite the same bile production. So could be a benefit. The bulletproof coffees and having like MCT oil in the morning isn't necessarily going to do dramatic wonders for you. It still has calories, but it is easier on the system, and if you're looking to keep insulin really low, that's a good way to, you might take yourself out as fast as far as calories go, but you are still keeping insulin in that really low point. So if you are sensitive to blood sugar spikes, that's a good way and good thing to add to your coffee. I typically will do heavy cream in my coffee, but have done MCT oil, and I handle heavy cream fine, but I've got plenty of clients who don't. So MCT oil kind of mimics that same really creamy texture and is like a good substitute. People ask if coconut oil is an MCT oil. It's not. Coconut oil is actually a saturated fat with medium and long chain triglycerides. So they are very similar in the fact that coconut oil is very easily broken down as well, partly to do with the medium chain triglycerides in that. But separate note, both of them are very commonly used in weight loss. Also, there's been several studies done for Alzheimer's and looking at the quality of the fat sources we're getting in MCT oil being increased in the diet compared to our just long chain triglycerides has seen positive improvements in that. All right, question 5 here is there really a benefit from adrenal cocktails? So I actually had to look this up because I wasn't really sure, like, are we talking adrenal cocktails being like cortisol support supplements, or are we talking something specific? And there's actually, I guess, this new drink, and maybe I'm the only one who has not heard of this, but it's got, let me actually pull it up here. It's got orange juice in there. Let me see here. Adrenal cocktail. Basically what I gathered from it is, so as far as adrenals go, our adrenal glands are what typically is going to be, or is what produces our cortisol. And our cortisol is a stress hormone, and we live super stressful lives. So it's really common for our adrenals to be fatigued because we constantly have high states of stress, and we don't manage our stress well, whether that's taking time to take care of ourselves, we're not eating for long periods of time, we're not getting the nutrients we need, we're not exercising. So there's a lot of things that can benefit and keep us from fully developing adrenal fatigue. I wouldn't say this is like the way to do this. This is just kind of maybe an aid. But this particular recipe I'm pulling up here says it includes sea salt, coconut water, and orange juice. So vitamin C is actually a big part of helping the adrenal gland. So it actually the adrenal gland store vitamin C, and it helps with the production of cortisol. Just like water, so if you're deficient in water and you're dehydrated, you're actually going to store more water in your intercellular. So you'll get inflammation goes up, even though you have less water you're intaking. Same thing with vitamin C in your adrenal glands. If you're low in vitamin C, cortisol actually goes up. So vitamin C is super prevalent in our foods. We don't have to consume that much to get adequate levels. However, it is water soluble and it goes through our system faster. We store, again, small amounts in the adrenal glands, small amounts in the liver, but being pretty cognizant of getting lots of good quality, colorful foods is a good way to keep vitamin C up. And obviously it's also good for antioxidants and immune function. So making sure that's just in your daily diet. So the whole idea of this looks like we're getting sea salt as some good sodium to help regulate adrenal function and regulate stress. That's a good one. And then obviously the coconut oil will be some of the electrolytes, and then the vitamin C from the orange juice. Specifically, if you are doing this and you want to make this drink, which it sounds really yummy, I would just make sure we're getting a good quality. We're not getting orange juice from a concentrate. We're getting it from, either make it from home, squeeze your own oranges, or you're getting it from no additives, just pure orange juice. All right. Let's see. Number 6 is going to be best diet for losing belly fat. Belly fat, this is always a common question that I have an answer maybe that you don't want to hear. Some of it is genetic, some of it's stress, some of it's hormones. Unfortunately, you can't target belly fat. Visceral fat, so the fat that we store around our organs, basically works as like an insulation layer, helps in the state of like a famine. We protect our organs by building up just in case we just can't eat. However, most of America is in a fortunate position where we're not going to the point where we're simply never eating. We're going through this like harvest fasting, gather, collect type of thing. What ends up happening is we build up too much visceral fat, which can end up suffocating our organs. So we want to be really careful of not having too much visceral fat. So that would be something that if we're not managing our stress well, you might increase that. If your hormones are unregulated, that will increase. If you drink a lot of alcohol and eat a lot of processed sugar, that will affect visceral fat. So if you've seen the common beer belly, the distended belly protruding that's really, really hard, that's visceral fat. So decreasing your alcohol, probably one of the best ways if you're drinking a lot. If you're really, really, really stressed, making sure you're managing that stress, making sure you're not going super long periods without eating where you're causing your body to store extra there, that you're not dramatically too low in calories and then suddenly eating a lot. And then just generally, as you build muscle mass, that will require energy going to those areas, help to redistribute how you store your body fat. If we're talking the outside external fat, typically, in most cases, I get clients who are actually not overweight, who are pretty slender, but they like skinny fat. They have some muscle, and a big part of that is simply getting closer to maintenance calories, not really a huge deficit, and just converting their own body fat, forcing their body to pull the fat that they don't really need from the midsection and pull it to other areas. So it's a very small deficit with higher protein and just really consistent intake. All right, number 7 is going to be what's the best source of protein if you hate meat. Typically, I'll go toward fish. Most likely, though, you're also not a huge fish person. So if you're not big into fish, cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, really good sources. However, what I typically tell people is they don't have to get all of it from Greek yogurt or cottage cheese or just a dairy product. You can obviously use your soy products. There is negatives to soy, so I'm not a huge proponent in doing a ton of that. Instead, I'll typically encourage combinations, so creating complete proteins from mixing grains. So a bean and a rice is a complete protein. We're getting it from there. Utilizing chickpeas, legumes, things that are going to be high in protein and a carb source at the same time combined. So we're not trying to get everything from a dairy product for our protein or everything from a protein powder. Those are more supplementation to help us get it closer. So if you are someone who hates meat and you're trying to do high protein, it may mean that you have to do a whole grain, higher protein bread for your bread source rather than a more fun sourdough or a white bread. If you're doing a pasta, maybe you're doing a whole grain pasta with the natural protein from there, or you're even doing a higher protein from like a vegetable pasta, like a chickpea pasta. Texture is a little bit different, but that is one of the negatives of not consuming a lot of meat. You do have to be a lot more cognizant, and you do need to make sure that you're combining so you do have the complete protein. If you're getting dairy products, you're not completely vegan, then you're going to be fine on that stance. But if you are completely vegan and you're not using those dairy products, making sure you are supplementing by having B12 a part of your diet and combining greens. All right, we're getting pretty close to the end here. I think we got 2 more. The next one will be, what's the best source of protein? Oh, sorry. Actually, this is our last question. Is there any benefit to being gluten-free for health? So gluten-free, if you have Hashimoto's, if you have epilepsy can kind of be a thing. If you've got celiac and an allergy, that's completely aside. Yes, you're going to feel miserable eating dairy. Gluten. If you are not allergic to it, if you do not have an inflammatory response, which you can get through blood work, testing, if everything's coming back clear, there's really not a lot of benefit to being gluten-free other than being more cognizant of where your carbohydrate sources are coming from. And in a lot of cases, gluten-free items are lower in nutrients. They are lower in fiber. They're typically going to be, in order to taste good, we're using tapioca starch, xanthan gum, things that are going to be harder to break down and less benefits to our overall health. So in most cases, if you do not have a negative inflammatory response, if there is not an allergy to it, that means kind of keep in mind, are we getting brain fog? Are you having distension and bloating and discomfort? Are bowel movements off? Then I would definitely go get tested for some possible allergies. If you feel like carbs just make you fat, so thus gluten is a carb and it's going to make you fat, that's not a part of it. I would start looking at the combinations, the quantities, that type of thing, rather than taking it out, because we do lose out on a lot of those really good B vitamins. All right, so that is all of the questions for today. I hope this was informative and helpful. I thank you for listening, and definitely keep your eye out for next week's podcast as we start having some guests on here. I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful week.